Hey folks, welcome back to the PlayStation Podcast. You got Kristen here. We are here for episode 406, and I'm joined this week by one Tim Turry. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. We have a very big boy interview-heavy episode ahead for you guys. Last week, Sid and I, we had a kind of a short episode last week, and we were like, get ready. We got a big one coming next week. And it's because today we got not one, not two, but three interviews for your listening pleasure. And all of that, we just couldn't push any of them aside because all of them were genuinely amazing and fascinating. So we needed to make sure that they happened this week. But
so many voices.
So many voices to share. We'll get to that a little bit later, but as a quick preview, we're going to be talking to some folks from Supergiant Games about Hades, which is going to be out next week. We are going to be talking to a couple folks from the Apex Legends team over at Respawn about Season 10 updates. And then Sid sits down with one of the product designers for the DualSense wireless controller to sort of talk about how they made that thing and how they made it so dang good. So we'll get to that in a little bit. We do still want to, talk about what's out next week, talk about some new news highlights from this week. But I guess we might as well just dive in with the news release highlights for next week.
Dive in. Yes, please. We will dive in deep all the way down into the underworld of Hades. So that's the big one for next week. So it'll be out on PS4 and PS5 August 13th. If somehow you have avoided hearing anything about this game, you should be very excited about this. Independent of your personal interest with roguelikes and that style of game, this is the one that I think clicks so quickly. And as you were saying, we got to talk with Greg Kasavin from Supergiant Games. Justin and I did, and it was such an insightful conversation. So look forward to that. But man, that game's so good.
I'm so excited because I started it on another platform, but I didn't get too far into it. And a part of me was like, I know this will eventually make its way to PlayStation. When it does is when I'll finally give it the go. And in the time since then, it is just, it was like up for Game of the Year. Like everybody was so into it. So I'm like revved up to play Hades now. And I can't wait to next week. Well, that's our only highlight for this week. So we're going to just dive into some quick news that could be used if you so choose. I'll grab this first one. So surprise, Ghost of Tsushima Legends is getting a standalone release and also has a new Rivals mode. And both of those are going to be out September 3rd. So for folks who are big fans of Ghost of Tsushima, this was sort of this multiplayer level that was added to the original game. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is going to be out on the 20th. And so this sort of, for folks who really got into Legends and kind of were like, I just want the Legends, there is a standalone version that will be available on the 3rd. We were talking about just before the show, you played Legends a bit, right?
This is so exciting. Yeah, I dipped my toes in when it first hit, and for whatever reason I wasn't playing a lot of multiplayer games around that time, and so I came to it later, and it has been such a delight. In terms of just like adapting the sort of combat of Ghost of Tsushima into a multiplayer setting, it works really well. The amount of communication and it has that sweet spot of you got to pay attention and you need to work together and call out where attacking enemy hordes are coming in and stuff, right. But it's not so technical that you can still kind of shoot the breeze a little bit with friends. It finds that sweet spot. And then the gear system is just the loot feels meaningful, but it's not so overwhelming with different stats and stuff like that. And there's cosmetics in there. You can
I have seen the various cosmetics. People submit. I bring up Share of the Week a lot on the show, but it's because you guys don't understand how agonizing it is for me to have to choose the 6 photos that we highlight every week. It's really, really hard. And as these games get better and their photo modes get better, it just gets harder for me. And Ghost of Tsushima Legends in particular, all of the customization that you can do with your characters and the different masks you can wear and the different armor sets and everything, and just the filter, the particle effects on the blade.
It
looks so cool.
It's insane.
So I'm very excited for this. I'm definitely going to give it a go. Now it'll be out on September 3rd.
We'll have to get a team that a few of us together as samurai and jump in. It's
we
so
should
much
do
fun.
it for sure.
Cool. Well, you may know a little bit about the next one too, Kristen, but
yes.
There's a couple, 2 or 3, or I don't know how many indie games that had some exciting news on PlayStation Blog.
I was gonna say just a handful of games that if you guys caught, we had an indie spotlight this week that we highlighted 7 games that are coming to the platform. I think Hades is the only one that I believe has a release date right now, so Hades is out next week. But we also, which I'm so excited for, Oxenfree 2: Lost Signals has been announced for PlayStation.
Cool.
I was such a massive fan of Oxenfree. I played it like 4 times, just like back to back.
Nice.
And it rewarded you for continuing to dive into it like that. It's just a creepy little game that is the dialogue mechanics, which sounds like a weird thing to be like, the dialogue mechanics, but genuinely the conversations that you could have and the way that you would go about choosing what you were going to select, and like even just visually the way that it would pop up and sort of be integrated into the story. They're doing really, really cool stuff over at Night School Studio. And that game was just an absolute joy to play as someone who, if you're like into anything like sci-fi, like Twin Peaks-esque type stuff, this is a game for you. So I've been thrilled to hear that there's going to be the sequel. So we have a blog post as well from Night School that is sort of diving into the new protagonist, Riley, and sort of her returning to the island that the original game is set in, and sort of continuing what is happening there and discovering what the madness is. But Oxenfree 2 wasn't the only announcement. We also had a bunch of updates for Axiom Verge 2 had a new trailer that looked very, very good.
Very cool. I was a big fan of the first Axiom Verge game. I think I remember playing that on my wee little PlayStation Vita and played through that first game, and I'm so super impressed by what we're seeing about Axiom Verge 2, and it's on full display in the new trailer that came out, which is like, it's super colorful in contrast to the first game was a way more darker aesthetic, sort of like dark caverns and monsters and stuff. And this is like, way more colorful, and it's revealed in this newest trailer that you're going to be kind of shifting through these dimensional breaches in between what looks like sort of the world from the original game, what you're more familiar with, and then this new, more colorful, kind of looks like almost like a medieval, like old-timey world. The solo developer, Tom Happ, he's not going into like crazy detail on everything because wants to keep that sort of sacred. But there are some details that he goes into about just the challenges of making sort of these 2 dimensions. But it looks great.
Yeah, it looks awesome. The trailer got me very revved up. We also had an amazing blog post. If there is a blog post here that I highly recommend that you guys go check out, it is for Sol Cresta, which is coming from Platinum Games. This is the 3rd in the Cresta saga, the Cresta series, I guess you could say. It's a sequel to Moon Cresta and Terra Cresta. And this game is 36 years in the making. Is that
all?
Is that just a little thing?
Yeah.
So the game designer sort of goes into the story of like, not just like, here's this game and that's coming out and take a look, but he's like, here is how I like, from the bottom of like my heart, was so into this game, and how deeply I loved it, and how intensely I wanted to make it. And here are the steps that I took to finally like get this story told that I've been wanting to tell over these years. And it's just a fascinating article. I highly recommend that you read it. But also this is like a top-down shooter, like vertical shooter game, and it looks really, really fun, and it absolutely brings back the spirit of those original games. Like he kind of goes into like when you talk about a shooter game these days, you usually are thinking of like your first person shooter Call of Duty-esque games. And this sort of harkens back to like what he thinks of from his childhood or from the past. But yeah, so a very heartfelt read from Sol Cresta.
I'm super excited about that. The top-down shmup, like when you combine like top-down shmup with Platinum Games, it just sort of like unlocks this part of my brain about something I didn't realize I wanted. And I also revealing that the composer is Yuzo Koshiro, who did like the Streets of Rage soundtracks, back in the Genesis days. And he's just a incredible composer. So it is bound to be a sensory delight.
Yeah. So we got a couple other great ones that were announced. So a short hike, you play this little bird that's trying to make his way to the top of a mountain, and it just looks like really sweet and peaceful. It's this like tiny little open world game. We have Witchwood, which is a crafting game, a crafting like little adventure game. And then Carrion is going to be coming out. Carrion looks so much fun. They call this a reverse horror game because instead of trying to fight off a monster, it's that you are the monster that is sort of like gotten out of containment in this secret lab, and you have to try to escape the lab and just like gobble up everything in your path on the way there. It looks really fun.
Great concept. Like just the animation alone is just a sight to behold. Like you get it immediately of what just, I don't know, you feel so powerful. But yeah, you do have to be strategic and solve puzzles to sort of get around the environment, and the humans can still do some damage, but it's really empowering. I can't wait to play it.
Yeah. And then as we were talking about Hades, we rounded out the morning with revealing a Hades Underground that I think you were on as well, correct?
Yep. Yeah. We got to sit down, in addition to this podcast interview that you're going to be listening to soon, Greg Kasavin over at Supergiant Games, he walked us through some, PlayStation gameplay, and was just kind of, it was a mix of like, talking about the game coming to PlayStation, but also just sort of looking back at like what this game has meant for Supergiant, and how much of a roaring success it has been for them so far. And they certainly earned it. So,
yeah. Well, without further ado, I think speaking of Supergiant, speaking of Hades, why don't we listen to the interview that you and Justin did?
Excellent.
Hey everybody, welcome back. You got Justin and Tim here, and we're talking to Greg Kasavin from Supergiant Games. Greg, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Really excited to finally get to talk to you about Hades, a game that I don't think it's any secret that I am a big fan of this game, even though it's not quite on PlayStation yet. But it's going to be soon. August 13th, it's coming to PS4 and PS5. Can't wait to sink another 100 hours into this game. Real quick, for anybody who isn't familiar with Hades, Greg, would you mind just giving the quick elevator pitch on the game?
Yeah, Hades is our roguelike dungeon crawler where you're battling out of hell, specifically the underworld of Greek myth, having had this sort of screw you dad type of blowout fight with the god of the dead himself. But the underworld is supposedly inescapable, and you're going to battle your way out or die trying. But as the immortal prince of the underworld, every time you die, you just wind up back at home and get to try again. And one of the unique things about the game is that the story keeps moving forward. There's kind of no sense of game over. So every time you die, the story keeps moving forward. The game is different every time you play. You'll get different abilities from the Olympian gods, all sorts of stuff like that. So it could be played in bite-sized segments, or you could play it for marathon stretches, and it's going to hopefully keep you interested for a long time to come.
That is one of the things I think the game does so well, is the idea of it really is just a one more run type game, because there's always something in the next room to look forward to. Like you finish a run, you die, you go back to the House of Hades, and okay, this person has an exclamation point over their head. I wonder what they're going to say. Is this going to move the overall story forward? Or if I give this person a bottle of nectar, am I going to unlock a new thing? Or, constantly seeing whatever is next and whatever the game has in store for you. And the game has a lot in store for you. It's deceptive because you can beat the game. You can, get all the way to the end. You can beat the final boss. And then it turns out that's just scratching the surface. You get that first clear, and that's just a taste of the good stuff. And then you play again, and you play again, and you play again. And then there's a true ending that you can unlock if you do certain things and all that, later you get that. And then there's even more after that you can keep on doing. Like, the game just gives you more and more to chase. I think when I played it, I finally exhausted all the content the game has to offer, but I'm never sure with this game was there a line that you drew about okay, this is where we need to call it. We need to make this be like the end of the content that we're providing to players. Or was there ever a desire to just see how infinite you could make it?
Yeah, there were both things. One of the interesting questions at the outset was, we wanted to make a roguelike game with a sense of narrative continuity from one playthrough to the next. So, roguelike games can be played forever. They don't typically have any kind of endpoint. So it's this strange philosophical question of how much story do you need in a game that can be played forever? And of course, we didn't know the answer to that. I just, for my part, doing the writing, I just didn't want the story to like run out for a reasonable person. So I apologize that it ran out for you.
You're not talking to a reasonable person, Greg.
At the 100-hour mark or whatever. I'm pretty comfortable with 100 hours, I suppose. But yeah, like for the average person playing like maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30 hours or something, they would just keep seeing new stuff for as long as they played. But we did want the story to have these kind of like exit points. We didn't want players to feel like they just had to play this game forever, like to the point of boredom or something like that. Like when sometimes I talk to players who, they may be obsessed over like a massively multiplayer game at some point, and they always have these kind of bad breakup stories with games like that of like, yeah, I played this game for 5 years and I can't even look at it anymore, because they just kind of grinded themselves into the ground. So we didn't want Hades to. We wanted people to like leave the game feeling good. So there are these points like the true ending and even the epilogue after that, where it's kind of an opportunity for the player to leave the game feeling good. Hopefully they accomplished a lot and feel like the game really rewarded their effort without it just sort of petering out and having nothing left for them.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience, and you put it well, where there are these sort of like exit points. For example, after I'm not going to get into any spoilers here, but once I saw credits, I felt like, oh, okay, I'm happy I really stuck with it. I feel like I've had a complete experience. And then, you continue. I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I'll just do a couple more runs, see what's going on. And then you're like, oh, there is more here for me to engage with if I want. And that's really exciting for players. But I was curious, compared to the sort of end product for Hades, as we know it now, and where it started off, would you say that the ratio of, just speaking in rough terms, of like story, like narrative driven content in House of Hades to like actual gameplay for like, from the beginning of the game to credits is about where you wanted it to end up? Or would you say you ended up with even more story content or less?
Oh, I mean, the game definitely got bigger than we anticipated at the beginning. As you noted, like the game, it's our first ever early access game, and we've never, we didn't know what that process would hold, just having never gone through it before. And part of what we were excited about for it was that it could help shape what the game would become. Where, whatever, we launched the game in early access. Sure, it's not done, but maybe people are like, this isn't that great. It's like, well, okay, then just, maybe don't spend the rest of your life working on it. Because if the concept is like fundamentally flawed in some way, then no amount of like tweaking or rebalancing is going to like fix like a bad idea or something. We can be that pessimistic about our own stuff. But on the flip side, if players kind of love the promise of it, we wanted to keep working on it and like fulfill the potential of it as much as we could. And that ended up with us kind of fulfilling the kind of the higher scope version of the story that we had in mind. It's still very much the story that we had in mind from the very beginning, inclusive of the epilogue and stuff like that. But we weren't always sure we would be able to like execute on every part of that story. And we were kind of very flexible about the number of characters and stuff like that. Like some characters that are actually pretty major characters in the story, we didn't even anticipate were going to be in the game until we added them during the course of early access. And that just, again, came out of players, really, really enjoying what we had for them so far, and us wanting to like kind of keep building on the parts that were showing signs of success. But yeah, I mean, I think if you would have told us at the start of the project that, we'd end up with like unique story content for like 100 hours of play or something like that, we never would have believed it. That wasn't like a specific target that we were going for. That was just kind of where it ended up when all was said and done.
Yeah, awesome. You come out and say like, yeah, we're going to make a 100-hour game. I think that would just set you up for failure right at the beginning. Like, oh man, that seems insane. 100. Yeah. How are we going to do that? But just kind of gradually adding content and increasing the longevity of the game over the course of, like you said, early access, which seems like it was the right move for this game, for sure. Seems like the right way to go.
Yeah, it was really really valuable. I can't like overstate how important it was to this game. It's not like a one size fits all type of solution. Like all of our past games would have been just miserable in early access. It just wouldn't have worked at all, I think. But Hades was designed around it, in part because it's kind of like a replayable game at the heart of it. So we could just keep adding to it in ways that kind of didn't break the game, at least not so much initially. Whereas with like a traditional beginning, middle, and end, it's like, what do if someone blows through your 8-hour game and it's in early access, like what are they going to do for the next 2 years of early access or something like that? Whereas with Hades, we could keep adding new stuff across different dimensions and keep shoring up, kind of keep improving things that were good about it, keep like shoring up some of the weaker points until we got to the ending and we felt that we were done and delivered on everything that we said we would do, and then some. And that led to our 1.0 launch last year, where it got to this kind of really explosive result. But of course, the 1.0 launch, we were hardly done. Right, here we are finally coming to PlayStation. So it's been a wild ride and a long road, but it really helps having a game that's like fun for us to actually play along the way, considering we've like stuck with it for this long.
And I'm going to call the PlayStation 5 version the definitive version of the game, because you can feel it when you pet Cerberus.
Yeah, the DualSense is an awesome controller. Yeah, and the kind of extra haptic juice that comes from those types of interactions are really cool. And I'm glad that things like the light bar and stuff are back too.
Honestly, I'm just excited to have an excuse to play more Hades, because I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I kind of did everything, but now like I'm going to do it all again. And I am totally okay with that. Like I am excited to dive back into this game because it is such a joy to play. It just feels great to play. Mm-hmm. It's a really well-tuned game, and everything about it is just delightful, from the visuals to the soundtrack to the voice acting to the story that you've crafted here that has so many different characters and storylines all woven into one another. Is there a specific character or storyline or story beat that you're proudest of coming out of this, like looking back on the game after it's been out for a while now?
Oof, it's that's tough, because the character, they're like they're like my babies, so it's like having to choose between them is really difficult. I'm so glad that the cast of characters and the voice acting and stuff have been well received. It's really awesome, because it's our first, like, all of our games have had some humor in them, but it's our most kind of like humor forward game, I would say. And that's one of those things, like we wanted to keep it a little bit hidden, right? Because it's Hades. You think it's going to be dark and sinister, and in some cases it can be, but it turns out to be a more lighthearted world than one might initially expect. And I'm really glad that some of the like humorous moments in the game have been well received. But I would say, like, we got early access feedback on a lot of the story, but one key part we did not get early access feedback on was the ending, the true ending, the credits roll and so on that you alluded to, and the stuff beyond that with the epilogue. That was stuff that we added, in our 1.0 launch. So like we were only going to find out how we did there for real. And I was very relieved, I would say, by the response to that, because it's having to resolve some pretty difficult story elements in a way that we were really interested to see if players if it would land. I guess if it would land for players, right? Like a bad ending can retroactively ruin something for you. It can like ruin multiple things for you. So Absolutely. Endings for me are really scary in that way of like, well, don't screw it up. Everyone might have liked everything up until this point, but now you're either going to pay it off or you might kind of not stick the landing. But we try to give our endings a lot of time. We never know how they're going to land for players for real, but we figure if we just the best we could do is give them a lot of time, and that increases our chances of the stuff actually working, and for players feeling, rewarded once they finally get there.
Well, for what it's worth, I think that you've stuck the landing on the ending of every one of your games.
Thank you so much.
I think they've all been excellent. Especially Pyre was just such an ambitious idea. How many different permutations of the ending could there be? Like thousands of different?
Hundreds of millions by our calculations. Is that all? Yeah.
Insanity.
So thank you for that. Actually, a lot of the narrative techniques from Pyre. Even though Pyre and Hades are super different games, so much of Pyre's DNA is in Hades, and the way that we approach the story, the kind of no game over approach to the story in Pyre, even the theme of it, of it's a game about escaping exile, escaping a form of purgatory. On a high level, the games have the same theme even. So we were still. Yeah, I've been working on chasing some of those ideas for years and years now, and they're still kind of infinitely compelling to us, I think.
You know what? On the topic of characters, and there's one thing I've been interested in asking you, which is just about the voice acting performances by some of the gods, and that there is a lighthearted element to the game. But one thing that really stuck with me is this contrast of Zagreus being really excited to sort of meet his extended family in Olympus, and them looking out for him and granting him boons and stuff, but with this super subtle edge of do they have his best interest at heart? Well, they're the gods, so probably not. But how did you go about directing that sort of voice acting and that nuance of, unreliable gods trying to ally with this, this relative in the booth?
Yeah, thank you for picking up on that. I mean, I think the part where the Greek gods are always they're this big dysfunctional family, and they're kind of always at each other's throats. That was something that was really compelling to us about the entire. That's why we wanted to make an adaptation of Greek myth, is to really focus on the family dynamics there, where they can be ruthless with each other, but we wanted to undercut that ruthlessness a bit with some of the humor and the kind of ridiculousness of the situation that they might find themselves in. Darren Korb, our audio director, who's also our composer of all our music and also the voice of Zagreus and Skelly. So he is quite a Renaissance man. He is the one directing all of our actors. I'm actually typically not there in the recording session. It's just Darren. We have a mental link about what we're going for with the performances, but I'll provide in the writing, I tend to provide a lot of the subtext of what the characters are talking about. So I think it's often the mark of interesting writing where what the words that are being said are not actually the meaning that is being conveyed. Right. There's two separate things going on when a character speaks. And so with the Olympians, it is that question of what do they want? What are these characters after? And they're these big, colorful personalities. So what they want can be quite clear. Like Aphrodite, the goddess of love, she's very interested in these kind of the relationships between people and wants to get at that side of things. Or Ares, the god of war, we have a particular angle on Ares, but we certainly don't dispute the part where he really likes war. He really likes violence of all sorts, and so he likes for situations to result, he doesn't like amicable solutions to problems.
Violence is the answer in his case.
Yeah. So it's really fun. It was really fun to approach them both from that standpoint and also from that family dynamic standpoint of almost thinking about a big, awkward Thanksgiving dinner was a thing that I would think about.
That's good.
How do they align with a different the big loud uncle is Poseidon, saying inappropriate remarks and slapping you on the back. And Athena, is the one person who has her stuff together and is trying to keep everyone from murdering each other, that sort of thing. So that sort of juxtaposing that Thanksgiving analogy onto the gods, I think it made them come to life for us.
Yeah.
And our voice cast just was fantastic. So I'm glad you enjoyed their work.
No, it came together really well. And I mean this in the nicest way, but Shades of Arrested Development came to mind.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
That's a fantastic reference. Yeah. For when it comes to dysfunctional family, also very wealthy families. Yeah. That's another thing that this family has in common.
So you've alluded to this a little bit throughout the course of our chat, but Supergiant is famously a very small team, and I think that you guys prefer it that way. It's kind of by design. Can you tell us a little bit about the team's philosophy in keeping the group small and what some of the pros and cons of that are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on the smaller side of things. We're a little over 20 people now, which as a percentage gain from Pyre is actually quite significant. So we were only 12 people on Pyre. We grew quite a bit for Hades relative to our small size, at least, knowing that we wanted to launch the game in early access and all this kind of stuff, and basically end up with a bigger game than we've made before. But within that group, all 7 of us who were there at the beginning with our first game, Bastion, we're all still there. That includes folks like Darren and Gen Z, our art director, and Amir, our studio director, who also does so much of the game design, and Gavin Simon, who is our gameplay engineer, created our engine, and our development director, and Andrew Wang, who's our technical director, makes sure our games run smoothly, and of course Logan Cunningham, who has been the principal voice in each of our games. He's the voice of Lord Hades, and 5 other characters. He's a multi-talented guy. He plays 6 different characters in Hades, so you can try and guess them all when you play. But yeah, keeping that group together, keeping the rest of us together over time, has been something we've really wanted to do, just to see what we can make together, and using that small size as a constraint, it unlocks, I think, so much of our individual potential. We may not be able to make, we can't make every single type of game under the sun with our 20 people, but when we kind of play to our strengths, it turns out we can make a pretty big and pretty well received game in something like Hades. So we still don't know the limits of what we can do, especially working together. And we know, having worked together across 4 games now, that we kind of bring out the best in each other. Like the work that we do together is better even than the work that we could do on our own. So there's some kind of secret sauce there that we can't even fully identify. It just comes from the creative chemistry between this particular group of people. So yeah, if that means that we can't make, the next World of Warcraft or something, well, that's fine, because we can make other stuff that we're really excited about, and we haven't nearly, none of us know what the limits of that still are. And yeah, so the small team size, it just means that we can collaborate really closely. We don't have to spend too much time on like communicating changes across the organization and kind of like big company problems like that. Like big companies have can do really powerful things. Like, we don't think that being small is like better than being big. It's just different. And some of us, myself included, have worked at bigger studios before, and we have enjoyed the vibe of being smaller. And it's worked out for us thus far. So yeah, if we could keep it going, we would certainly like to.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. How much like cross department work happens at Supergiant? Like, are you going to Jen with ideas on kind of the visual style of the game, or is Darren coming to you with ideas for how this character would react in a certain way, or is it more like everyone kind of is the master of kind of what they are in charge of?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's a little of each. When it comes, we give tons of feedback. We like ask for feedback, and we give feedback as well. So no work at Supergiant like happens completely in a vacuum. But there are definitely those times, when Darren as our composer will just like knuckle down and we'll know he's working on some piece of music, but he'll bust out with it when it's nearly complete and say, "What do you think?" And chances are the feedback at that point is like, "Dude, this is awesome. No further questions, Your Honor," or whatever. And he's and that's that. Or similar with Jen's like artwork and character designs and stuff. But when using something like characters as an example, we do collaborate very closely, and both Darren and Jen and Amir are closely involved in that process, where like I may be sort of like proposing the character initially just in writing. It's like, hey, let's we'll have Achilles or something like that in this game, because the Greek myth theme gives us access not only to the gods of Olympus and these like little known gods of the underworld, but also to the heroes of Greek myth, because they all end up in the underworld after they die. So we could have Achilles there, and then it's like, well, what's he going to be like? How's he going to speak? Who's going to play him and stuff like that? And we have these different, someone like Jen. It's really valuable for her to be involved in that process early on, because we don't necessarily have the art for the character before we get to writing or even casting the character. So for her, like being able to immediately say, oh yeah, I can imagine what this guy is going to be like, and this sounds like just the right voice I have in my mind's eye for what he's going to look like. That's super, super valuable. So we're always sending our work to our peers for feedback, and then we'll play test more widely across the team. So anyone on the team, it's the sort of team where like, we have folks at Supergiant whose jobs do not they revolve around other aspects of the studio besides like the hands-on development of our latest game. But everybody gives feedback during our playtest. So we need everybody to play our latest game and tell us what they think, because the more perspective we have on our work, the better it's going to be. Nice.
So I think we're coming up on time here. I got a couple other things that I want to talk about. Do you feel like, obviously Hades had a really long development process, if you can consider like from the time you started working on it through early access, through the 1.0 launch, and now coming out on PlayStation. Do you feel like the game, when all is said and done, did it land where you wanted it to? Is there anything else that you wanted the game to achieve, or anything else that you wanted to be in the game that didn't make it? Or do you feel like this is it? This is the finished product. This is what we set out to do.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like more than we set out to do. It's so I mean, especially given the kind of response that it's gotten so far, like we can't we don't even, it's like games become these big houses of cards at a certain point where it's like, don't even breathe on it anymore, because everybody likes it. Don't touch it. We're very like, I think we got in, all the stuff we hoped it would have and then some. There's obviously, when it comes to Greek myth, there's like infinite, or not infinite, but there's like obviously like scores of other characters and stuff like that. But there's no one that we wanted like in this story that we didn't get in, for example. And we got in, we just got in way more than we thought we would. And the response has been amazing. So we're really, really happy with where it ended up, especially the part where we could kind of put a bow on it with the story, and have the story end. And again, like based on the feedback we've gotten, folks seem happy with where it all ends up, and that just makes us feel really good about how players can feel about the time they spend with it. That's all we want for players to come away with like a positive impression when all is said and done. Yeah, so we think we did that for most players at least.
Mission accomplished. Yeah.
Tim, anything else you want to ask Greg?
Oh, just like a million things, but I feel like this has been really illuminating, and so, but yeah, just echoing what Justin was saying. Congrats on all the much earned success, and so excited to play it again on PlayStation.
Yeah, we're really excited to finally have it come to PlayStation. I was saying before, if only it were just. I wish all the programming engineering stuff were simple. I am not an engineer myself, and what they do is mad sorcery that may as well be the work of the gods. And it's really tricky to make games like Sing on just feel right at home everywhere they are. And we really appreciate players' patience in us finally getting there with Hades.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think you definitely got there as somebody who sunk 100 hours into the game and is going to sink 100 more hours into it on PS5. I think that it's your best work yet, and that's coming from a huge fan of your studio since the early days. So yeah, just congratulations, and thanks again for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. That's Hades. It's coming to, excuse me, it's coming to PlayStation 4 and PS5 on August 13th, and you should play it. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a very fascinating listen. I just can't wait for this game. Like, watching the Underground, listening to you guys talk about it, like I'm absolutely ready for next week to come.
Same. I have finished this game and I am ready to do it again after talking with Greg some more.
Nice. Well, Sid is not here as we're recording right now, but he is still going to be here for the show because we have 2 more interviews that are coming up. The first one is he was able to sit down with Travis Norden and Steven Ferreira from Respawn to talk about probably his favorite game for the past 2 years. Like, anytime you talk to Sid, he's like, "Oh, I've been playing Apex. I've been playing Apex. I can't wait to play more." So he had a great time talking to those guys about Season 10, which dropped earlier this week on August 3rd. When they recorded it, I think it was just before, so they might mention like, "Oh, out soon," but it is out this week already. There's a new legend called Seer, so they're going to dive into a little bit about the updates and about talking about the new legend. So let's listen into Sid.
Hey folks, I'm here with Steve Ferreira. He's a team director on Apex Legends. Welcome, Steve.
Hi.
And Travis Norden is the design and engineer extraordinaire, is what the notes I took in our pre-meeting here. Thanks to both of you. You're key members of the Apex Legends team, and I wasn't going to let Season 10 launch here without at least getting a couple minutes with a couple folks on the Respawn team.
It's always super exciting around launch. It's one of the great things about working on Apex and a live game in general is that you'd think that the excitement would wear off season to season, but it's just as good each time. Just the anticipation of waiting to see what the community does with the stuff that we put in the game. The whole team is buzzing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been actually playing Apex since the very earliest days, and my oh my, has this game expanded considerably in the last 2.5 years or so. I was sort of reminiscing with you before we hopped on here, but just incredible to see this game evolve over the years. Have both of you been involved since the beginning?
No, so both Travis and I joined slightly after launch. It was a few months after that. And so we weren't around for the initial development of the game, but obviously we were around to see the crazy excitement and what the community did with it and the response everybody had, and that just rode the energy of that wave. And that honestly, the team is still riding that today. It's like you said, it's just grown exponentially from that first day, literally.
Totally. And I was a day one player too. So getting to go from being a day one player to working on the project too is very exciting.
That's great. And I mean, the ambitions have grown. I mean, we've seen everything from, several new maps at this point. These are big, big, big maps, Battle Royale maps. And my personal favorite has been the new 3v3 arena mode that's come out the last few months. That definitely got me back into the game in a big way. It's a very different way to play, much more small scale, intimate combat. But,
yep.
Tell me a little bit about how fan feedback has maybe influenced the way that you folks are kind of, integrating new features, new weapon balance, just all kinds of stuff. You guys are always sort of changing things around a little bit.
Oh, 100%. I think, the community is definitely a part of the process in a lot of different ways, whether it's what we hear from, the pro scene and see going on in the ALGS. We even do regular, like closed tests with people to check in, get kind of a snapshot of what people are thinking while we're trying a few things out. Early days, we're obviously always getting feedback from the community. Whether it's we're all looking at Reddit all the time and reading a bunch of the comments there, good or bad, and we take all of that in, right? And it's kind of, it comes from all directions. It's not like a group in the team that just looks at all the community feedback and then passes that on to the team. The team at large is always kind of absorbed and part of the community, because a lot of the people, everybody on our team plays the game. And like you said, right, like we were day one players for the game as well. And so we think of ourselves as part of the community, and it influences everything we do. I know a lot of what we do, whether it's a character or a map or the new modes like arenas, that's all driven by what we're seeing players do in the game, either through data or through playtests or through, just hearing the community talk.
That's cool. You guys have definitely been very involved with the community. I follow the Apex subreddit as well, so I'm always looking at the new memes and all the thoughts there. It's a really fun community. It's really pretty positive. I mean, just like a really fun vibe. One of the things I like about the game is that it's sort of bright and cheerful and just colorful. It has like a very distinct sort of vibe. But I do want to hear all about the new season here, which is season 10. That's amazing to say that. And I was seeing all the materials you guys have been putting out lately. World's Edge, very iconic map in Apex Legends. It looks like it's all busted up, for lack of a better word. So what can you tell me about that? We didn't get you don't get to get a full inventory of exactly what's different. You sort of get some imagery, you get a sense of it, but tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we really we always tried to make sure we're making some meaningful changes to the map season to season, and they're not, just there for the sake of being there. We want to actually change the way the maps play. And so one of the main things we wanted to do was look at the north end of the map and drive more action towards that side of the map and balance it out a bit more than it currently was. So the POI that was there in the north refinery, we've wiped that out and we've replaced it with a new POI called Climatizer, which is much larger in scale than what was there before. So the idea is to hopefully encourage more drops in that location. There's more loot there. It supports more teams. We've also added we always like to add some toys to the map with each update. And so we've added, we used to have the train in World's Edge, which we took away. So we know we've added something similar in along those lines. We've added the gondolas back. So it gives it a kind of moving cover between combat fronts within that space. So that's one of the big changes that we made there. We also took the fissure that was in Fragment, and we actually extended that up throughout the map and kind of increased in general the amount of lava and ice that you see in that region of the map, which is cool to see those two things kind of collide and contrast against each other. So we did that, and then as you come down to the center of the map where you had sorting factory, which is obviously a pretty iconic POI and central to the map being in the center. We wanted to kind of change up the style of gameplay that we had there. So where we used to have very kind of free-flowing lanes that kind of cut through that whole space, and it was a big space. It's still equally as big, but we've kind of changed it up as to these almost islands where you have stations. You have a lava siphon station in the center. Then you have on either opposing side another big kind of encampment. And then again, gondolas going between the two with even a longer range between that. And then lava in the middle that kind of cuts it off. So it encourages these long range encounters, but you can quickly bridge the gap and then get into those close quarters encounters in the interior spaces as well. So I think you're going to get a lot of a different feel from these POIs, but in general, the map will also feel bigger and more open as a result, with more loot and be able to support more squads.
That's great. And every time World's Edge kind of gets an upgrade or an overhaul, I'm on board. It feels like a better and better map each time. Travis, from your perspective, I mean, how difficult is it to go in and retrofit like such a huge sprawling map? I mean, these are huge areas. It must be quite an undertaking.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of work on the level team. I think they, to kind of to Steve's point, they kind of pick out POIs they want to go after. Like you said, the northern end of the map, a little maybe underutilized prior to that. So trying to encourage more people up there. And then the one change too that Steve didn't touch on was the train yard. That's kind of been flattened out. Right. What I heard from the level team was, train yard, super fun POI, but with all the verticality and different train cars you could hold, the fights tended to go a little long. And the longer the fight goes, the more people hear the gunfire, the more people congregate there, and you could end up with just like this massive teams there. So,
100%, 100%, yeah.
Still make it a fun place to play, but hopefully kind of alleviate some of that pressure on there.
Yeah. That's cool. It's good to hear like some of the inside talk here. Okay, obviously Seer, the new character that's dropping alongside season 10, kind of captured everyone's attention. A lot of captured some imagination as well. So tell me a little bit about Seer. Like, how fans are dying to know, just kind of like, how does this this new legend kind of fit into this huge group of legends at this point? What is it, like 17? It's big.
Yep. Yeah, and you're in luck because Travis was the key designer on Seer.
Yeah. So I can speak to that hopefully better than anyone else. So he's a new recon legend. I think he's going to carve out an interesting sort of area and niche. Bloodhound's a really popular pick right now. We'll see if we can get some Bloodhound mains over to Seer mains. But the way I would look at it is Bloodhound is really good at, you can find those kind of breadcrumbs. So you're not necessarily where a team is, but you know what direction they went, and you can follow that, and you can hit a POI and tag it with attack, and it's a sort of like big cone, right, and see who's there.
Right.
Seer's a lot more intimate. So the example I've been using is kind of, you're in a building and you hear some footsteps and you're like, wait, is that my buddy or is that another squad here? So you can pull out the heartbeat sensor and kind of get a reading and look around to see if you find anyone.
Cool.
If you do, you can hopefully tag them with Seer's Tactical, which is similar and different. Again, the Bloodhound is this wide cone and Seer is much more focused. So kind of like a focused beam or cylinder, if you will. But if you tag them with that, they're revealed for 8 seconds. So that's our longest reveal in the game. You see their health bars. That's the first for a legend too. So if someone is, one tap or sub 50 health, your team knows and they can go push them. And then also has an interrupt mechanic, which is another new thing we're adding to the game. So it's definitely going to be a spicy one. But if he catches, legends after a fight using a shield bat or rezzing their buddy, he can interrupt that with a tactical. So definitely will be interesting to see how that's received. Fun to use. And the ultimate, again, some similarities to Bloodhound, but he's kind of carving out his own play space with it. He throws out his heart chamber and this sort of swarm of microdromes form this sphere around it. And then within there, Seer and his team get to see legends who are moving faster than a crouch walk or firing their weapons. So you're not revealed all the time, but if you're, running around and engaging in combat, Seer and his team is going to know where you are. But there is some counterplay there. Obviously if you stand still, you're not revealed, and the heart chamber can be destroyed. So we've seen in playtests, if you're not smart with where you throw it, if you throw it right in the middle of the battle, it's going to quickly get shot down, and there goes your ult. So some interesting counterplay there as well.
No, it's interesting stuff. It's good to hear sort of the inside track there. Another one that caught my eye is a new LMG, Rampage. So
yes.
LMGs are sort of an area in this game. We got lots of assault rifles. We're getting more and more shotguns, SMGs. There's quite a few of those. But LMGs, it was always kind of like, here's like the two big ones. I think there was a third one added at one point. So tell me a little bit about how Rampage fits into the LMG category.
Sure, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we really started off with the Rampage was we wanted it to kind of not just be a weapon in terms of another standalone weapon that sits alongside the rest of the LMGs. We wanted it to change how you interacted with the loot pool. So right from the core, the first thing we kind of nailed down with that weapon was that you could use some type of ordnance to kind of charge it up. And so where we landed was with thermite. So while it's kind of a slower rate of fire thumping LMG, when you charge it up with a thermite, then the rate of fire drastically increases. And we played with a lot of different versions of how that could impact the gun, and things like, should it do more damage? Should it just increase the rate of fire? We even had things like
we were painting fire at one point.
Yeah, we were painting fire, so you could set people on fire with it and paint the little obstacle courses of fire in front of people with it. We tried all sorts of crazy stuff with it, but we always knew that was going to be core to it, was to really change how you think about picking up ordnance in the game. And it's been really interesting to that effect, because now when you do pick up that Rampage, all of a sudden you're just hungry for thermite, and you're trying to siphon it up from everybody around you so you can charge that thing up. And again, we're just super excited to see how people play with it and what it does to the meta in general.
That is fun. It reminds me a little bit of, I think it's the Sentinel, where you use the shield battery to charge it up. Yep. And that was a very interesting weapon when that came out. And, it kind of opened up some new avenues. But yeah, thermite, at least I'm more of a Arcstar guy.
Yep.
Thermite has its place. It's devastating in the right hands, but it's maybe not it's not as sort of all purpose as maybe as some of the other grenade types. So having that there as like a additional use for it actually makes a ton of sense and should be a lot of fun. Well, that's great. Taking some time to walk us through all the changes, and best of luck.
Great. Appreciate it. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Well, yeah, I know Sid is going to be absolutely thrilled. I haven't dived into Apex for, I'm trying to think what season I was in last. It wasn't quite at launch because I started at launch. I was like, this is really fun. I'm very bad at it. And then a friend of mine is very, very into Apex. And so I promised him that I would try playing again. And I always do the medic character. And I think I need to switch it up because I'm not very helpful.
Yeah, it's fun to shake it up. It seems like season 10 is a good opportunity.
Yeah, Seer looks very, very cool. So if I do dive back in, I will absolutely be playing as him. But for now, let's dive into our last and final interview.
Sidney
Schumann on the PlayStation podcast.
Oh my gosh!
So Sid had the joy of he was able to sit down with product director Toshi Aoki here at PlayStation to talk about the DualSense wireless controller. So Toshi was part of like building this thing. Like he was like the head of the team that was, how are we going to design this? How are we going to make this new innovation with all the haptic feedback? So they really get into a little bit of just what was the inspiration behind it? What were some of the things that were the main priorities for them? And some of the games that he think are the best ones that show off these DualSense features. So let's tune in again for Sid and Toshi.
Mm-hmm.
Hey folks, I am super happy and excited to welcome Toshi Aoki to PlayStation Podcast. Welcome, Toshi.
Thank you, Sid.
Now, you are in demand, and one of the reasons for that is you're the product director here at Sony Interactive Entertainment, so you have a big part to play when it comes to PlayStation hardware.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. And I wanted to actually delve into some more of the details around particularly the DualSense wireless controller, which you're actually you played a big role in that device.
Yeah, so I was the product manager for the DualSense controller, working with the engineering team, in the industrial design team, the PlayStation Studio teams as well to collaborate and then get the DualSense controller that everybody's using right now.
Yeah, and I mean I think it is no shocker that it's a pretty damn cool device. I mean, I just wrapped up Returnal over the weekend.
Nice.
Really good implementation of the DualSense on there. It's just one of those things that's impossible to describe. You just have to feel it for yourself. And so I did want to talk about a little bit about kind of how the DualSense came together.
Mm-hmm.
You're the man to ask. You're going to have the answers here. But I think particularly, the haptics, the adaptive triggers, it's definitely sort of made gaming a more immersive experience than we've experienced before. We've obviously had things like rumble and force feedback, but DualSense is really going a lot bigger there. So can you tell us a little bit give us some insight into how these cool features, haptic and adaptive triggers, how it all came together?
Yeah, I think start off with the core concept of what we wanted to achieve with DualSense. As you just mentioned, stepping up the next level of immersion was there, and we wanted to connect the players and the game seamlessly and have the controller kind of disappear, like get out of the way. So in order to do that, we wanted that, how can we create that new immersive feeling? And for the haptic, definitely it was a technology that was starting to come around. And then we wanted to make sure that that new technology was combined and married with the gameplay experience. So that's where, we were working with the PlayStation Studios and then making sure that the technology is not just technology, that it is optimized for gameplay experiences.
So you're telling me PlayStation Studios, the different development teams, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, there's a whole bunch of them. I won't list them all, as tempting as it is. So they actually weighed in on this. They had feedback for you.
Yes. So as you asked about how it started, it was originally our engineering team coming up with a tech demo. It was just balls rolling, and as you can imagine, and you were able to change those balls, like from wood to plastic to metal, and then you can actually feel those textures. But that was kind of a tech demo of we can really create that texture feeling. And that's when we created those early prototypes, handed off to the PlayStation Studio teams and asked like, but in the gameplay, how does that convert to? What is the excitement that the game developers feel based on that technology? And then they come back with, new demos and more requests to us actually of making it, better, stronger, all those things, which were our new requirements to make sure that the new technology fits into the gameplay.
I'm going to take a wild guess that Team Asobi with Astrobot's Playroom, Astro's Playroom, I'm going to assume that they were sort of early adopters of this technology.
Oh, yes, you got that right. They were definitely the early adopters. One thing, because they were based in Japan, in Tokyo, right next to our engineering team, they were kind of the first ones to be able to, get it by hand and then try it out. But they created the early gameplay demos, potentials, that helped the other PlayStation studios, understand what that technology can do instead of just one tech demo from the engineering team. It's always coming from the gameplay. Game teams is always kind of helpful.
What are some other examples? I mean, I've played a lot of PS5 games, and, I think like with a lot of cool features like this and hardware, I mean, there's a whole number of ways to implement things like haptics, adaptive triggers, and some games do it and, with kind of a big flourish, and others it's a little more, subdued or subtle. What are some examples of games that you've been particularly inspired by and impressed by sort of how they've been able to implement these features?
Yeah, I think the two big examples, one is Astro's Playroom, as you mentioned. They're more, upfront showcasing how those new features can work. So it's more of, it's in your kind of face, it's in your hands, like showing off what the new capabilities are. But then there's the way the Returnal uses, which is more ambient. Like it's really fit with the environment, using also the 3D audio, the visuals, and the sense kind of combined into one. So you don't really feel like it's pushing you. It's like you don't feel it's coming from the controller, actually. It's like you're inside that environment. That was another big and new way that they used, which I really love.
For me, another one that really kind of opened my eyes was Call of Duty, actually. And just the way they were using the adaptive triggers to really sort of almost simulate the feel of like firing these different weapons and things like that. That was a definite sort of eyebrow raiser for me.
Yeah, I love that too.
Tell me a little bit about how the actual technology works. So I keep hearing this term like actuators and, like these haptics, and how does it all come together from a technical perspective? What's going on inside that DualSense?
Yeah, so the technology, the device itself is called a voice coil actuator. So it's basically you input like audio wave and then it vibrates based on that. So it's like a small speaker that's in your hands, so that you can create different frequencies, low to high, that creates different feelings. So we have that fidelity of going across that frequency band.
So some of the games I played on DualSense, some of the games there's almost a directionality to the haptics, and can you give us a little insight into how that exactly works?
Yeah, so we have two voice coil actuators in the controller, right and the left, and basically it's kind of as you imagine. We start off like from the left a little bit and then go to the right, so that creates the left to right feeling. We were able to enable this because of the fidelity, the frequency that it can use. So the handoff from left to right is so smooth that's why you feel it as one connected instead of the left vibrating into the right. It's more of that one controller feeling.
More seamless, more cohesive. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed that. And, I guess I wouldn't have guessed that the haptics, which are very, very advanced on the DualSense, unlike anything I've tried myself, that it's really just kind of powered by audio wave files at the end of the day, right?
That's correct, yeah.
That's fascinating. What do you think is the most difficult part when you were putting this together? Like, how long ago did DualSense conceptualization begin, and what was the most difficult part kind of getting it over the finish line?
Well, I'll start with the easy part is like how haptic feedback when we started, sharing it with the PlayStation Studio teams, everybody just got on board. They love it, getting the excitement. So like defining which features to put in was pretty easy or early on. But the hard part is more of making sure the balance of that with the ergonomics to make sure the controller doesn't get too big or too heavy. Also making sure, the devices work as we intended to. Just making sure that balance part was the most challenging.
In your own words, what kind of impact do you think that the DualSense controllers had on this new generation of gaming?
I think we've had a very positive kind of transformative impact of the gameplay experiences for all players. Being able to feel the actual gameplay, and that, as I mentioned earlier, that we wanted to have the controller can disappear, that you're connected directly to the game. And I think that's a new level of immersion that not just the DualSense, but PS5 as a whole that we wanted to target.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most exciting controller I've used in a long, long time, and that's saying something because there's a lot of great controllers out there in the gaming world. Where do you think it goes from here? I mean, this is early days. We're not even 12 months into the launch of PS5, and we're seeing some great stuff. I mean, we talked about Returnal. Obviously, Astro is incredible, and there's lots of other cool utilizations of the technology, but it sure seems like early days, and I would think it's going to get better from here. What's your take on that?
Yes, definitely. I think it will get better as well. One of the capabilities we added to the DualSense controller is the firmware update or the software update. So as the game teams, understand technology more, the devices more, they'll come up with new ways of using it. And then we want to make sure we adapt to that and evolve the controller side as well so that we're capable to go to that next level together. So it's not just ship and done, just making sure that we are working together with, again, the gameplay experience team, the game developers, to go to that next level and keep evolving.
That's great. That's the folks you're going to want to talk to to get the most out of this thing. And finally, before we take off, have you had time to play any games yourself lately?
Well, I was playing a lot of Returnal. Unlike you, I haven't finished yet. Right now, I'm kind of going into the Ratchet and Clank world.
Nice.
But after that, I'll definitely go back to Returnal and try to finish it.
I liked Returnal so much that I didn't want to finish it all at once. I got to a certain part in the game, and I said, I'm going to put this aside for a little bit because I don't want to live in a world where I finish this incredible game. And obviously, the haptics and the adaptive triggers, that's a really cool implementation, like that L2, bringing it down halfway to activate the secondary fire.
Yeah.
Really cool, and just I love the flexibility that the DualSense offers, and I hope we get to see more great examples like this in the months to come. I'm sure we will.
Yep, definitely.
Outstanding. All right. Well, Toshi, so good to have you on the show. We'll probably look to have you back here maybe in a year or two and do a little check-in, see how DualSense is progressing.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. I was really happy being here.
Awesome. Well, I love that sweet DualSense controller. That was a nice, short and sweet interview, but it's always interesting to hear folks that are on the tech side talking about things, because I'll be honest, I don't think about what really went into the building of it. I'm just like, give me the technology.
Right? That's part of the magic. If it's done well, you won't even think about it.
Exactly,
but then it's so fascinating.
So, and I know I'm so glad that they talked about Astro, because absolutely, like when you open up your sweet PS5 and that game's already there loaded up and you're just sort of like, let me give it a go. It is such the perfect expression, I guess, of the DualSense.
Yes.
Like, it really uses every single part of that haptic feedback and all the different features. I know Returnal has been a really, really good one as well.
Oh yeah,
for feeling that. So I love video games.
I concur. But what have you been playing, Kristen? I'm curious. I haven't had a ton of time lately, but I want to know what have you been playing with your DualSense controller?
Well, I have been still not beating Going Under, which I was telling you a little bit before the show. I mentioned last week I started Going Under, which is this like dungeon crawler roguelike-esque game. You play this unpaid intern who's just like trying to work her way up the corporate ladder, or not even really. She kind of like immediately is just like, oh God, like, is this what I used my marketing degree to get? Like, what am I doing? Every so often you'll get different missions to go down into the dungeons of like previously failed startups. And whenever you do certain missions, you'll come back up and give it back to your mentor to let them know you finished. And you'll be like, oh, do you have a job for me now? Like, can I actually do something that I went to school for? And they're like, yeah. Can you go back